Hello. Last part of actual just solid waste. And the next part of this is going to be toxic and hazardous waste. And we'll start that. I'll send the videos for that a little later. As you can see in this chart, over the 60s, we have kind of increased in the amount of trash that we're creating, but we have also, on the positive side, increased the amount of recyclable materials and the amount we recover from it. However, our landfills also is increased. Again, this chart is for 2000. Recycling in the past couple of years has actually gone up to a great degree, both because some places they have incentivized it, like I was talking in the past in the previous videos about bauxite, creating that closed loop recycling is actually very effective. A closed loop meaning it's you start with somewhere sometime back bauxite was used to make aluminum, and then that aluminum can is recycled and recycled and recycled to make more aluminum cans. So that is a closed loop recycling. And then you also have plastic is more of an open recycling, because you're going from one product to the other to the other. So you're not making the same product with it. For example, you make milk cans, then you get, once those milk cans are recycled, you make water bottles. Once those water bottles are recycled, and down the line, you make plastic bags and stuff like that. So that is actually an open loop. Both of them are pretty effective, closed loop being more effective than an open loop. Make sure that you write those two things down. Example for a closed loop is aluminum. An example for an open loop, I don't know why you would call it a loop if it's open, but that's what it's called, is plastic. Next, we're looking at different things in terms of yard recycling. There is a national obsession with lawns in the United States. There is a very good episode by Penn and Teller on HBO's not HBO, I think it's Showtime's bullshit about the national obsession with lawns. Lawns do create a lot of waste, more waste, but again, all of this is organic material that can be reused. One of the things that we have are these gasifiers. Most rural areas have them. It is a method to take, very ironically, living and recently living material and kind of soak them in water, let a certain amount of bacterial action take place, and then you actually apply pressure to it and you convert it into gas. This gas is used a lot for cooking, and in some places even for heating, and it's used for what do you call that, cooking, heating, and it's also used for in lieu for electricity. Black liquor, and there's also a way of making biodiesel. I'm sure most of you have heard of it, where you can use use the oil from fryers and stuff like that in a small enzymatic action with with the sodium hydroxide will give you biodiesel. In the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of like cars that are converted into biodiesel. I think a biodiesel conversion kit is maybe a couple $1,000s. As long as gas price stays at $4, which it's not right now, the biodiesel is a pretty good option. Otherwise, not so much. These are some more figures that, again, remember, these figures are from 2013, 2003, 2004. So these numbers have changed per se. There is a huge demand for computers. I'm sure there's like more than 300 million computers waiting for disposal right now. The heavy metal contamination, that is definitely a huge problem. We are seeing heavy metals in places where they shouldn't be. Later on in the chapter, we're going to talk about brownfields and sick buildings, and that's that would kind of tie into that. In Europe, there is the cradle to grave manufacturing, where you buy a product and it is the responsibility of the manufacturer to make sure that that product is recycled, and is recycled in the best possible way without contamination and all of that stuff. Again, I think in the previous slides we talked about the EPA challenge, which Sprint is actually doing very well in this. The EPA also has, you need to know this, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, which kind of sets the framework of how companies should deal with hazardous and non-hazardous waste. There are guidelines for this. It is a law. However, there's not a very good inspection system. So most companies, again, remember, the job of the company is not to make sure that your health is safe. Their fiduciary duty is towards their bottom line. Sometimes that kind of disposal method, even though there is a law, if there isn't enforcement or implementation of the law, you are expecting people to do it out of the kindness of their heart. That does not usually happen. So in the United States, there is a company called Earth 911, and Sony and Acer, both these companies have signed up with them. And Earth 911 basically picks up all the Sony and Acer computers. If you take your Sony or Acer computer to Best Buy, they will take it and ship it to the Earth 911, and they will do the recycling of it. However, at the end of the day, the biggest problem is consumer responsibility. Most of us don't take it in. Most of us don't look at our trash company dates and find the day when we can send our we can take our e-waste to them. We just let it pile on in the house till one day it just becomes too much and we get rid of it. However you get rid of it. None of these programs. So most of the programs the EPA sets up, unfortunately, they are they're what's the word I'm looking for? They're well intentioned. However, the problem is enforcement. And implementation and enforcement is very, very budget driven. So when countries don't have enough, when the United States doesn't have, has huge budget deficits, well, some of the first people to suffer would be enforcement and implementation of EPA, which it shouldn't be, but it is. And a large portion of it also is we're lazy. The best way to do anything is actually reuse stuff. I don't like I most of us are not used to this. Again, I think it's very economic driven. Um, People in higher middle class, and anything above that tend to create more waste than people in lower income groups, just because we are not used to reusing as much as we could. We're not, most of us sitting in that room are not used to reusing a water bottle. We are not, and we're not, we could afford to buy more than one computer. We want to buy more than one, the latest phone and stuff like that. We do. So the culprit in most of these cases is, unfortunately, even though middle class and higher are the people who do most of the recycling, we're also the people who create most of the waste. We Because we refuse to reuse. Um, the best possible way is to actually shrink the actual waste stream, is to produce less waste. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Now, the idea of this is not in your slides. I'm not going to go into toxic and hazardous waste right now, but here is couple of things that's not in your textbook, but you need to know. The main idea of any kind of recycling system or waste management is, one, to reuse slash recycle, two, to actually store and store/dispose. Since we cannot dispose of a lot, storing comes into that. So the storing part is landfills and disposal part is incinerators. I'm going to give you a top down the best ways to manage trash. The best way to manage trash is to not create a lot. So that is prevention. The second way to reduce trash is to minimize how much trash you create. Third, reuse. Fourth, recycle. Fifth, energy recovery. Energy recovery is fifth. Even though it does produce energy, it does require a lot of input. So there is a cost factor involved there. And the sixth part is disposal. Again, in disposal here, it could mean a mass burn where you're not harnessing any kind of energy, or it could be a sanitary/unsanitary landfill. I'm gonna go over that again. It's prevention, minimization, reuse, recycle, energy recovery, and disposal. Prevention being the best method and disposal being the worst method. So I'm not going to start hazardous and toxic waste on this in this chunk of videos, but you'll have it next week. Bye.